afternoon. My name is Brandon Hamber, and I'm the John Hume and Thomas P. O'Neill Chair in Peace at Ulster University. Today with me, I have Nicole Drouilly, who is connecting to us from Chile, and we're going to be discussing a textile that she has donated to the Conflict Textiles collection. For those of you who don't know the Conflict Textiles collection, Conflict Textiles is home to a collection of international textiles which focus on elements of conflict and human rights abuses. The collection itself is curated by Roberta Bacic from Chile, but she lives in Northern Ireland. And at the heart of this Conflict Textiles collection is 370 arpilleras. These are picture textiles which are normally made from scraps of material. They originated in Chile, and they generally record the maker's responses to conflict, often their own first-hand experiences of conflict. And this is an approach which is now extended way beyond Chile, and the collection has many different countries represented. So Conflict Textiles is really the primary resource for arpilleras internationally. And there's the physical collection, as I mentioned, of 370 textiles, but that's also hosted online through Kane at Ulster University, which makes this collection global. And part of the mission of Conflict Textiles is to not only educate people around the challenges facing survivors of conflict, but also conflicts more generally, whether Chile, Northern Ireland, and many other countries. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today with Nicole. And as I mentioned, Nicole is from Chile. She's a textile artist. And on the 3rd of December, we're going to be putting up a textile that she has made in the library at the Magee campus, which is part of a permanent exhibition that we now have at the library with Conflict Textiles. And so today we're going to have a chat with Nicole to hear a little bit more about the textile that's going to be in the library. So Nicole, you're very welcome, and sorry for the long introduction, but it's good to put some context to what we're doing.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. I first want to thank you and thank the INCOR International Conflict Research Institute of the Ulster University, and also Roberta Bacic, Conflict Textile, for giving me this opportunity, which I must add is also an opportunity for my family to best remember our sister Jacqueline. As Brandon said, I'm Nicole Drouilly, Chilean. I'm now living in Chile after a long exile in different countries.
Well, thanks, Nicole. We really appreciate it, and it's great to have you here to tell us about the textile. So maybe a place to start is if you could describe the textile to us. You know, what is it made of? How does it look? We can obviously have a look at the images which are up on the Conflict Textiles website. I'm going to put the image up now for this video as well. But maybe just in your own words, if you could just describe to us what the textile is.
Well, for everyone that work with textile, I have to say that there is nothing nicer than to speak about textile and to speak about actually how was it made, because the process of the making and the tactility and of handling the materials is what make the textile so important. I have to say this is about 2 meters by 180, something like this. It's entirely made of cotton, cotton thread, cotton material, cotton batting in the middle. The format it takes is the format of a quilt done with patchwork. I have to say that the sourcing of the materials of the fabric has been done throughout many years, because in Chile there is not a sort of you cannot go to a craft shop and get materials for a quilt. That doesn't exist, except in the very posh areas in Santiago where it's almost impossible to buy them. So also the fact that to have put all these materials together, I think in itself is an achievement. Also, I want to say that the palette of colors is my favorite palette, which is the blues, the greens, and the browns, sort of earthy colors. And the importance for me, although I do know about arpilleras, I have done arpilleras, and I participate somehow as a young girl in the practice of arpilleras together with the relative of a disappeared in Chile. Also, I did them in exile. But I decided to use the quilt format because to me, the quilt format has a long story of women's stories, has to do with that task that society has given us, and now we are rebelling against it, to be able to provide for the family and try to do what we have, and being in charge of the survival of that small unity. And also the fact that it has been done with recycling materials, usually. Um, I am a big admirer of those women that in very difficult circumstances, throughout the times, they have done through different techniques, um, put some beauty and some logic and some order and some geometry where the objective was just to get something warm for to cover yourself.
Mhm.
So it's something it's full of meaning for me, and that's why I like this question so much. It's full of meaning for me. How was it done, and what was involved into the process? It took me ages, absolutely ages, to find a good method in which to transcribe the writings of my mother about Jacqueline and Marcelo, my sister and brother-in-law, into materials. I have to do a big research about permanent pens and light boxes, and which I am very proud. Although now I have sort of, I feel that it could have been done better. Okay, but that's always the way our brain work.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to do this quilt as a gift, actually, not to Jacqueline, my sister, but to my mother. My mother devoted such a big part of her life to searching for Jacqueline. And in the process, she spent, like many other mothers and relatives, she spent so many hours thinking about suffering, trying to solve a problem which was too big for her to solve. And and again, I think it's only fair that we speak about a technique which has been developed by women historically, and we also speak about my mom, who have been in this quest for so long. So the quilt is actually to her, to her quest, and in the memory of Jacqueline. It's a bit complex, but that's the way I
Mhm.
sort of saw it.
Well, that's incredible. And I have quite a lot of questions about the quilt. But maybe before I ask those, because obviously I know your story a little bit and I know about Jacqueline, but we were just started talking about Jacqueline. So people who are listening to this might not know the context of the quilt. So maybe if you want to just, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about Jacqueline and Marcelo, and then we'll go back to the quilt, just in case there's anyone who listening who doesn't know the context of where this quilt and why it came about.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon, because we live in this internal reality, and sometimes we think that the whole of the universe knows Jacqueline and knows Marcelo, and of course, thank you for for giving me this opportunity. Jacqueline was my older sister. Um, we have 8 years of difference between the two of us. We um, we were four sisters. She was 24. She was pregnant, 3 months pregnant, and she was married to Marcelo Salinas. They were both students, university students, and they belonged to a political left-wing party, and they were arrested during the in 1974 during the dictatorship of Pinochet in Chile. They were taken in the middle of the night from their home, and they were kidnapped by security forces in the most brutal way and taken to a succession of clandestine torture centers, and they were brutalized. And we know exactly what happened to them during those days and hours, because we have witnesses, people that unfortunately saved their life and were after political prisoners. So we know what they went through. And we knew years later, many years later, that it was only about a month and a half after they were detained that they were taken in the middle of the night together with a few other prisoners to a place, and we suspect that they were then killed and threw into the sea, um, which was a method used by the security police for disappear. That we didn't know at the time. We didn't know for many years, so we were always with this fantasy that we will recover them. Our life as a family, my life, was completely cut in two. So there is a before and after Jacqueline disappeared. And this has shaped our life, because my family, like many other family, have devoted themselves to search for justice, to find out exactly who were responsible of this crime, to know exactly what happened every minute that she was in custody of the state. And my father and my mother died about 10 years ago without knowing what happened to Jacqueline and Marcelo. So we have now the three sisters, and of course nephews, and it's a preoccupation in our mind. It's a permanent worry that the story of Jacqueline and Marcelo doesn't get forgotten. And it seems like everything we do, and this actually include what we are doing now, and what Conflict Textile and the INCOR has given us a possibility to do, is that to tell about the story of Jacqueline and Marcelo, because they were not surplus to this universe. They were important. We miss them terribly, and we think that they deserve a place with us, irrespective to the fact that their life was cut so short.
No, well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, and it obviously has been a very long struggle, as you say, and I think anybody who knows even a little bit about Chile knows how long the struggle for justice and the search for the disappeared has gone on, and so it just really helps, I think, conceptualize or contextualize what you were saying about the quilt being representative of your mother's struggle and time that she invested in, as you have as well, and your family in this search. So how long did it take you to make the textile? And did you feel maybe when you're doing it that that's part of a sort of remembering? Are you remembering all the time as you're doing it, or what is that like for you? I mean, I've never done that, so I don't know what it must feel like. And also that you're using your hands and you're thinking. So what's that process like in terms of the remembering?
Well, the first things, I'm an archivist by profession, so the first things, I wanted this to be also something from the heart, if you want, something from the fight, from the struggle, from the activism, but also something which was going to be an historical piece which will be used as a primary source of history.
Mhm.
So the first thing I did is that my mom was a poet. She never published actually, but she wrote throughout her life, and she never threw away any papers she wrote. So when my mother died, I was in charge of keeping those papers from her, and they're quite incredible. There are a number of boxes with this very thin paper where she has written by hand about different things in different periods of her life. And first, I have to go through that and select which pieces would I put. And that took me a long time. And also, it was quite sad, okay, because I was always thinking, oh, it would be so good if my mom will be alive. And because my mom loved the textile, loved the art, loved the human um, um, endeavor in which you produce something tangible. And I thought it would be so good to have her there, just sitting there and looking what I was doing. So I select some stuff. I also select something right by Jacqueline herself. And that took a long time, and that was quite sad. And then it took me a long time, as I say, to see how I would have actually write this into material. That was before I even thought about the quilt. It took me about 10 months, the whole process, but I did not design the quilt. The quilt designed itself. It was, I started to just using the techniques I know, and which I'm not extremely proficient at it. I spent time looking in Instagram for the work of quilters, women around the world, and I'm amazed at the level of perfection and proficiency they have, and I'm nowhere near that. So I just start to play with little things, and then I end up with a big pile of pieces of things. And when you look at the quilt, you think that I had an idea and that it all came beautifully. It is not true. It's a sort of very organized and chaos, which it established the level of order in the way it is compiled. And and it also, now I'm talking to you and I'm looking at the quilt because I'm fascinated by the quilt. And I don't want you to get me wrong. It's not because I think it's perfect. It's not because I think it's the best quilt ever. It's because it's so full of meaning for me. And now I find things which they were never supposed to, they were not meaning that on the quilt itself. And now I look at it and I think how well balanced it is. And I start to have a sort of admiration, which I promise is not an ego trip, because the quilt exists
Mhm.
separate from me. You understand? As I say, it creates itself. And I, I wrote in the for Conflict Textile, I wrote that there is a sort of mandala, which is a sort of point to look. There is a sort of journeys and obstacles we have to sort. Some of them we haven't been able to sort, and there is the interaction into the human soft word and a line of the real hand, and the very straight line of the geometry, which always fascinate me. And yes, I was thinking about Jacqueline the whole thing, and I have to say that because this is a work so charged with her and Marcelo and my mom and my family, and justice and that world we want to create, which we are so far away from it, and we never think we are advancing enough, is that in my mind, when I look at the quilt, it's a quilt that I did with Jacqueline.
Mhm.
Then she sort of guide me, and she sort of there is a bit of an identity there with her. So now I was saying before, I say actually to you before, that I have the quilt everywhere in my home. I print it, I frame it, I have it at work, I have it as my desktop in the computer, I have it at my desk, um, because it fascinates me. It's one of the extra element of I would say craziness that inhabit our mind when we as relatives of disappear are forced to have to live in these two alternative realities where we have to accept something which is not humanly acceptable, and where we have to actually function as human beings, go to work, cook, clean, laugh, you understand? And this is to me the meaning of the quilt when I see it. I know it sounds terribly strange, although I am sure than women who do this kind of textile, I call it textile art, but actually it's a bit of, it's an aspiration. I'm not an artist, okay, but I call it textile art because I think that what we do, the women who do this kind of thing, is not just sewing and cutting, okay.
Mm. Yeah, that's incredible what you're describing. Do you sometimes look at it and think, where did that come from? How did I make that? Like, was it me who made that? You know, you talked about making it with Jacqueline. I mean, do you look at it like that and think, I don't know how it happened?
I do, I do. I have a very sui generis system of belief, completely done by me for me, which they have no logic whatsoever. And I do think that we are at one with the universe, and we are not just pieces of molecule, you know, and cells. And I think that we draw from others, we draw from the past. We I'm proud to think that I may be considered part of this is this tradition of women history, of people who are not on the top of the pyramid of the human power, you know. Yes, that's why I'm so fascinated by it, because somehow that part I don't recognize as
Mhm.
coming from me.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe this is going to sound a little bit academic, but there's a psychologist called Winnicott, and he talks about these ideas of transitional spaces. So spaces which exist not in the real world, but not completely in a fantasy world. And so, you know, he talks about children when they're playing, they exist in this world. It's not in the real world, but it's not a complete fantasy. So they're living real things, but it's also, you know, in play and in fantasy. And he would say that art is sometimes like that, and it's why artists don't always, you know, it's like they surprise themselves because they've entered into this place that's somewhere between these different worlds. And when you were speaking, that's what was sort of coming into my mind. And then maybe on the more serious side and the more challenging side is that I think disappearances for families must be like that, because it's so real, but because it's never finished and it's never the reality of it, because you never see the person, is like not there, that it must feel like that. So when you were speaking, if I may, that's what was I was thinking as you were describing this very complex process.
Well, I do love that psychology already, okay, the one you mentioned, because it's true that we do, um, as I say, our life is not that flat, okay, and I think that um, we are surrounded by sort of portals or gates in which we venture sometime, and and our mind is something so extremely powerful and magic, but we do not exist on their own. You understand? We are not just us. You know? It's like it's very important to think that there is no personal achievement as such. You understand? You are always drawn from others, from history, from people around you, from trees, from and I think that that's why I am very grateful to Roberta of Conflict Textile, because she actually didn't say to me, do a quilt or do something, but she told me about it, and I was so fascinated. And then she told me she was coming to Chile, and as Roberta being as she is, she told me about a year in advance. So, and me, I thought, actually, at the beginning, I thought I will do a gift for her. I will do something for her, okay? and whether she wanted to show it, it has the value to be shown or not. But I will do something for her, okay? And then I start to develop that idea, and that took some time before I actually decided to do that. And I never told her that I was doing this because I never thought I would be able to finish it. And I never thought I would be able to finish it to my liking, something that I would really want to display. You understand? But as the time approached and she was coming, I was sort of working very hard the last days, the Chilean way, always the last minute. And and to me it was so important then, although I didn't speak to her, then I will give her something which was Jacqueline's, which will be with this other textile from other women from other places going around, you understand? And also I thought it's an excellent way to preserve this, you know, because it's not going to be just on a bed or something. It's going to be, someone will actually look at it and think about it, and it will be exposed. Um, when she came and I showed it to her, and I had the opportunity to bring my family and my friend to say bye to the quilt, okay? At some point she said to me, you know, you can change your mind if it's so important to you, because when I start to describe it, I start to get excited. She said, it's so important to you, maybe you may change your mind and not give it to me. And I said, no, I have to give it to you because it's important to me. But when the quilt left, I didn't actually like him much, okay? It was a bit of a sacrifice. And then, as I say, I do think that it's very important when you talk about this irreality of the disappearance, because it's true that one of the most terrible thing about this horrible crime, which is as horrible as many other crimes, it's not more horrible than any of the other violation of human rights. I don't mean that, but it's against the grain of our own humanity that we are, someone is just taken and then we don't know anything about it, and we can never actually um, is a particular form of cruelty, you understand? And then the people have to adjust themselves. The people are forced to adjust themselves. Some people have decided not to talk about this, not to ever talk about this. It's too painful, you understand? And you have a lot of relatives who disappear who um, they have they don't want to be involved. They don't want to talk about it. They have created an alternative sort of some small explanation, and there are the people who have found someone to blame, not necessarily the security forces, because it give more meaning to what happened. And but there are a few of relative disappear is like a, statistically it's like a minority, but a large minority, in which the relative have found the struggle for justice, for truth, has actually helped them to cope with this. It's like an output, okay? And to me, I have always found that the truth, the truth help you to, the worst thing that can happen to you as a person and in your mind is to have separate dissonant realities. So to me, it's very important that I incorporate that cruelty into my life, and that is part of my reality. I want to live with a suffering, not because I am a masochist, because that suffering is full of meaning. And if I take that suffering, I'm also taking a part of Jacqueline and Marcelo, and I don't think I can do that. I think that will give us a result. It will cut me in two, and that will give the sort of solution will be much worse than any of the suffering which imply this.
So you're talking about incorporating the suffering into your life, and that's why you also have the quilt on your screensaver and everywhere. It's not like a obsession. it's more that it's just that recognition that this exists inside of you and your family, and you just keep it alive. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. It's like it's not only for me. It's for my family. Uh, we are we have permanently behind the sort of behind us permanently a sort of a volcano, a sort of a huge thing, boiling, and which can be triggered by the most ridiculous things, the most an important event, and suddenly you have this horrible impulse to cry and it's permanent, and imagine the number of years which have passed, and but this is the person we are, this is the life we live, this is the as they say, this is a card which were for me, you understand? And I didn't choose it. I never had the chance to decide, will I have my sister disappear or no? What I will choose. It was just given to me, I always say that in my life there is too big sadness, too big lack of, which have somehow shaped my life in different ways, okay? And one, of course, is disappear and the loss of Jacqueline and the loss of Jacqueline today, okay? The fact that I don't have her today also. And also the fact that I cannot have children. This has been also a big pain in my life, which I have to adapt my life, not only to the fact and to the practicalities that I don't have children, which of course make um, only people who don't have children wanting to have children can understand what I am saying now, okay? But you have to adapt all your aspiration, practical and everything. But also is the loss. To me, in my mind, is these two big losses, okay? But I accept them, you understand? I accept as they are. They are huge, I cannot manage them myself on my own. But I go around, I find ways to do it, ways that they don't make me into a bitter person, they don't make me into a person who is asking for why the world is like this, why this happened to me, why it has to be me, I'm past that, it did happen. And I am not so egotistic that I think that this really happened to me. It happened to Jacqueline. It happened to Marcelo. Okay, and we are suffering because they suffer and they lost in our life, but we are not here the protagonist. You understand? And but I think that incorporate suffering into your life and incorporate the loss into your life make you a better person. Although we didn't choose that,
Mm.
because you understand more the human suffering, you understand more the other, you don't assume that your suffering are bigger than someone else, and that made you be a better person, or at least is what I would like to be. I don't know whether I'm near that at all.
No, I mean what you say to me makes sense. I mean, in my work, I'm a psychologist and I work in conflict, and people often sort of say to me, what is healing, And healing is not like forgetting things or having this perfect life. I think it's what you describe. It's incorporating the good and the bad and uh, the difficulties that are just part of who you are, rather than um, something else. I don't know. So I just felt that you were just describing to me very perfectly a sort of, I don't know, healing's maybe the wrong word, but it's that like incorporation of just accepting uh, these issues, and that the bad part is part of that, and we can't really escape that.
Yeah, I understand, and I completely agree with what you said, and I think that the work you do, which has to do with conflict and everything, it actually have to do with that. Do a step and look the thing from the other side and understand that even the people who haven't passed through some of this experience, people that you look at them and you think, oh, they have such an easy life. It's not true. It's completely unempathic to think like this. Life is very difficult for everyone. Uh, and, and people suffer throughout life. You understand? Life is suffering, you know, because as you invest yourself in other people emotionally, you put yourself vulnerable for suffering. We are suffering because we love Jacqueline, you know. I suffer the same as I suffer with Jacqueline, with Marcelo, because I adore Marcelo, you know. And you have to continue loving people. But you have said something, you have talked about a sort of healing, but you have qualified that because it's a sort of a sort of working healing, okay, which I understand perfectly that you say. But when people said to me, when I do whatever, and they say, oh, this help you to heal, I say, no, I will never heal. There is no healing, you understand? I will never heal. I have to just be able to find the inner resources to be able to live, be happy, build within this, you understand, within this frame. That's why there is another concept which I actually hate, which is resilience, you know. I hate resilience. I'm not resilient, you know. It's used sometimes in cases of sexual abuse, you understand? Oh, the resiliency of, there is no resilience. It's a horrible suffering that permeate the whole of the life. Why they have to be resilient? Why the people who is in the receiving end has to be responsible for building their life no matter what? There's no resilience, you know, understand? There is no something that you have to think that people who suffer must be responsible for their own healing and their own resistance. No. What you need to do is to accept that something horrible happened to you. I wish so many times, I wish that it would have happened to me and not to Jacqueline, you know. And I know my mom did the same, and my sister and my father. You understand? And you will be surprised to what I'm going to say. But when I'm very close after the time that Jacqueline disappeared, when we knew that she was being at that time tortured and all that, and it was a horrible suffering. I remember with my mom, we were staying in my auntie house while we were going every day looking for Jacqueline and everything with the whole family. But I remember that particular instance. And after doing so many things with no result with my mom, I was 17. We went to sleep together, and I remember I hugged her in the back, and she said to me, I am so tired that I just want to close my eyes, and I think I may not awake ever. And she said, and I hope maybe Jacqueline can do the same. She said, maybe she can just sleep and all the suffering will stop, and you know. And I think that this is the kind of thing which happen to all the relatives, which when they have been involved in something so close with this, you know, is that at some point you don't know what's best. And I remember thinking throughout those months and years, thinking it's so horrible what's happening to Jacqueline and Marcelo. And at the same time, just to think that my dad, which I adore, my dad, and who was destroyed with this, just to think that my dad could be detained and tortured, which my dad was already, he has been detained happily for a few hours. He has such extremely luck. He saved his life a couple of times. And me, I was thinking, and I think I was thinking that because it was a way to reassure myself that what was happening was horrible, but it could be even more horrible, okay? It was a sort of psychological resource. And I was thinking, thank God this did not happen to my dad, because I don't think I could endure it. You understand? Although I couldn't endure neither the fact that it was happening to my sister, but for my reason in my head, it was a sort of hierarchy, you know, that thing could be even more horrible, you know. I always think about that, and I think, why did I think that? Even now, I think I think it will break my heart to think that my dad could be could have been subject to that. But so does Jacqueline. So I don't know where the logic came from, you know. But I think that uh, I always say to people on my ship psychology, I think just remember things can always be worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is an important thing to think when you are doing when everything is going so wrong, you know, in your life.
Mm. Well, I think that's very powerful, and what you said earlier, that it's hard to imagine. I mean, given the suffering you have been through, that you would say, well, there's someone else's life who could be worse. But I mean, I do understand what you're saying, and I also appreciate what you were saying about the healing, and because it is what I meant when I used that word, that it's the sort of learning to live with it. And while you were talking, I was looking for this quotation because I wanted to read it to you and see if it describes it. And it's from um, uh, a researcher here, Patricia Lundy and Mark McGovern in Northern Ireland, and they were interviewing another victim or survivor, and I think they asked about the word closure, because you hear people talk about closure, and I would always sort of say to people that closure is never a goal, I would imagine, because it's the same even if you lose a loved one in a normal circumstance through old age or whatever. You never close that chapter. You don't just close that chapter off in your life. And in that quote, the person says, closure is not about you, closure is about everybody else. That's what closure is about. For you, it's about learning to live with a new situation and dreaming about the past. Closure is definitely someone else's agenda, because how do you close something that's in your head? You have to learn to live it, learning to live in a manner that's good for your health rather than being unhealthy, always being depressed about what happened. So they're just talking about this idea of it just being with you, and it's who you are rather than closing something off. So that's what I was thinking about and was looking for it when you were talking about the healing issue.
It is very accurate, I think, because um, it's like there's something which the actual relatives will never say. It's always said by someone else, you know. Like, for example, um, a relative or a person who has survived, you know, torture or imprisonment, they will never speak about reconciliation. They will speak about justice, you know. And the justice will not just be a court or investigation or research justice. It will be the fact. I think to me, justice is not just that everyone involved, and I mean everyone involved in the suffering of Jacqueline and Marcelo and the unborn baby, as brought to justice and um, uh, being given sentences according to the crime. It's not just that; it's that the whole of the society incorporate and accept that
Mm,
what happened was wrong. You understand? That it should never have happened. And then those people, they had their dignity, because this hasn't happened in Chile. You understand? In Chile, there is still a large number of the population which defend what the dictatorship did. You understand?
mhm,
And that is it's even boring for me to speak about it, because I think that I think that is so abnormal. It's so it just shows that the dictatorship in Chile was never actually um, defeated. You
mm,
understand? It was just Pinochet gave the power to the sort of wishy-washy politics, and everything stayed the same. And of course, I'm not so extreme to believe that it's the same to live now than in the dictatorship. Of course, no.
mm,
of course, it's not true. But then you may want to ask the people who lost the sight during the protest, do they think that this is better than a dictatorship? I think they will disagree with me. They will think it doesn't make a difference for them. They still have no justice. You understand? But it is true. Coming back to your quote, which I really like it. It is true than some people. There is a pressure of society for us. Stop to bothering people. You understand? Stop to going on and on and on. You understand? They think so many years and you know, and they don't understand that even the Convention Against Forced Disappearance, by which the relatives of disappearance were involved in the design of it, explained that it's considered that the relative of the disappeared, they are victim of torture because of the crime, that particular crime of disappear, exercise torture on their life permanently. Okay, this is a convention, a human rights convention, because the thing with the disappearance is that is counter nature. You understand? And I think a lot of families of relatives have managed to get their remain identified. They have been found, they have been identified, they have done a sort of funeral maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. And I think that is a very important event. And I'm somehow happy for those families, which now they have a place, they have something tangible, but it's not closure. You understand?
Yeah.
The people were taken alive from their home, you understand? And then you get a very small box, you know, with bones. Some of them, they're even fragment because the dictatorship, many years after most of the violation of human rights happened, they did an operation to hide the crimes. So they went to the places where the remains buried, and they took them. They took them from there and they threw them on the sea or different places where they couldn't be found. And some of the people have been identified because small fragment of the hand, sometimes as little as 2 or 3 fragments, which have been sent for DNA. So the family is given a little box where there are, I don't know, 60 grams of bones, you understand? And the family has to, which they know that because it's given by a judge and it's part of the family has to sort of try to understand this, which is impossible for a human being to understand. You are bury a little piece of a finger. So where is the rest? You understand? Where is the integrity that we have as human beings, as part of our dignity, the physicality of our bodies, of our remain, you know? And sometimes I think that as much as I campaign myself for that, I think it's another crime, you know, done against the relatively disappear. So it's very complex, you understand?
It is complex, but I think you articulate it very well, and it's why I raised the issue of closure, because here and in other places you hear those same things, you know, the same voices saying, when will the victims stop? You know, it's 50 years, it's 40 years, why are people still going on? And I just think, sometimes that's a political agenda, which is what the quote says, but it's also about a lack of understanding. And I think the way of you talking about it as torture over a very long period of time maybe helps capture that. You know, the only way you could really close the situation was to bring people back, you know, and you can't do that. So it's just an impossible thing to really think about.
And it cannot be done. You understand? It's like we used to have these fantasies with my family, and I think they are shared by many other relatives for years and years and years. That Jacqueline was alive somewhere. We have this complex we never spoke about it much, okay? We used to just give the, speak about my sister. My mom used to mention it, but we never actually sat and analyzed, because if we did, we would have realized it was a completely fantasy, okay? But in Chile was a place where was used as a detention center, which there were Colonia Dignidad, there were some Nazi German, which set in a place in Chile. And anyway, and it was discovered later, some people were detained there, and etc. Um, and we used to think, because Jacqueline went to the German school till she was sort of 14 or something, so she spoke perfectly German. Uh, and we used to think maybe she was taken to Colonia Dignidad, you know.
Mm.
It was another, a friend of Jacqueline, another young woman disappeared on the same situation, which also attending the German school in Temuco, whose who, whose mother and sister, they were very close to us, and we did the search together. And we used to think maybe they were taken, both of them,
Mm.
to the German colony, Colonia Dignidad. Maybe they have drugged, maybe they don't know who they are, maybe they're teaching German, you understand. It was so ridiculous, it was so extreme, and we used to have this sort of every so often this fantasy will come to us, you understand.
Mm.
And of course it didn't have any sustent, you understand. We used to think that maybe I remember reading about 10 years later, it was sort of, or more, 86 or something, uh, or maybe the 90s, I read something that in Turkey, I think it was on Turkey, people who have been disappeared for more than 10 years, they were discovered. They were kept on a cave or something.
Mm-hmm.
I could not believe that. It was like my whole life stopped. And I remember I didn't go to work that day. I called and I said I was ill, and I was crying with Steve and calling Chile, and I thought, these people, after 10 years, they're still alive. They were in very bad condition, but they were alive. And then thinking, yeah, but there is no more evidence, because I'm a very logical person, you know. You may not believe that, but I'm very logical, and I'm thinking, but that's 10 years. Can I find information about these people disappear who have been discovered after 10 years? Because then Jacqueline had been disappeared more than 15, or I don't know. I couldn't, of course. And But it actually moved my world, you understand.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 I remember, because Jacqueline was taken, and in the middle of the night she was wearing night shirt, and she was allowed to be put a cardigan or something. And um, and we know that it was a pink cardigan, okay. My sister Michelle, she wrote something about that pink cardigan, um, when I saw Schindler's List, which was
Mm.
a very cried film. Um, I remember that the only thing in color was actually the
Yeah.
coat of the little girl, which was red. And of course, I keep thinking about the pink cardigan of Jacqueline, okay? Which, by the way, I hate the color pink, okay? But that's the only exception I do. And I remember that when some people were, some remains were being discovered in some place, it wasn't even Santiago. And one of the items being discovered was a cardigan of a sort shade of, a piece of cardigan of a sort shade of pink, which was nothing to do with Jacqueline, the place, the kind of repressive event, you know what I mean? And 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 I remember my sister called me from Chile to tell me that. And we were saying, but it cannot be Jacqueline, it cannot be Jacqueline. Still, it cannot be Jacqueline, but still we we were thinking that it was Jacqueline, okay? And I remember I was waiting for Steve to come, to tell him to come from work. And when he came and said, I need to tell you something. And I went to do a teapot of tea to sit with him with the tea, because I got very English when I was in England.
Mm.
And I had this impression that the tea will solve almost everything, which actually it did. And I did a teapot, and it was a yellow teapot. And I took the teapot, and I was very moved, and I was crying. It was. I always say that. I know people may find this a bit too much, but this soap opera we live, okay? Because to me, I really think sometimes we live in a soap opera, okay, in which there's always these high emotions, okay? And I remember that very clear myself handling the teapot, which was round and hot, to take it to the table. And Steve was bringing the cups to tell him this, okay, to share with him. And when I took the top of the teapot to stir it a bit, I hope I'm not committing a crime with the tea, but to turn it a bit, when I was going to put out, I was so distressed that I dropped the top of the teapot, and it smashed on the floor. Sort of a third of it was broken. And well, I told Steve, and I cry and I cry and I cry, and I told Steve, and then next day Steve said he was doing tea, and he said, "Do we have another teapot, Nicole?" This is the kind of question we get the women at home, okay? And I say, "I don't know." I said, "You may have." Why? I say, "We have a teapot, the yellow teapot." He said, "No, but the top is broken. I think we have to buy a new one." I say, no, I say, that's historical. The top of the teapot is broken, but it's historical break. You understand? We have to keep it to remember. He said, I still say to remember what? To remember what I told you about Jacqueline, about the pink cardigan. And he said, "But Nicole, that's too sad. That's too sad." I say, "Yes," I say, "it's too sad, but it's tangible. It's touchable, you know." I know Steve learned to live with me, and because he loves me so much, he think he has an idea of me which is not real true, and he think I'm clever than I am, and I'm meaningful than I am, and I think that he thought it was very logical after I explained that for him. And we kept that teapot for years with the broken top, which was very inconvenient because the hot steam will come and will burn you when you pick it up. But it's because, and I think I speak for all the relatives, we are always trying to create meaning in objects because it's something we have, you understand? It's something we can pick up and we can touch. And it also shows about the level of fragility of our mental health, you know? I always say that to me, my mental health is like I'm continuously walking on the side of a precipice, you understand, with a big cliff, and I have to be focused, I have to be focused in the front because I have to walk fast and I have to walk without looking at my feet, because I do that, I may fall, okay? I will not have the equilibrium, the balance to walk. So I have to walk fast through this dangerous place, just thinking ahead and thinking that I will arrive where I am going, but it's a very perilous journey, you understand? I don't know if it sound a bit crazy, really, but
No, it doesn't sound crazy to me at all. It makes a lot of sense, and I mean, there's so much in what you said. But I think that point of saying, these objects make things tangible, which I think for disappearance is the biggest part of the crime. I mean, it's the government or whoever making something that you love intangible. So to me, it makes sense that you talk about making things tangible, and it maybe brings us back to the textile, because the textile is such a real, tangible object, and it's so full of meaning. I'm sure you could, speak to me about every piece that's in there, the little poems and what it means and why this writing and not this writing. So it's a very tangible expression. So that's the word that stuck with me. And so it doesn't sound crazy to me at all. It makes perfect sense. And then, the fact that you're speaking like this, I imagine, would be very helpful for other families, and not just in Chile but everywhere. Just, I'm sure that it must, what you described, be a very similar experience.
yes, I know we have a language. I mean, maybe we have a common language, the relatives who have actually been active in searching for their loved one. But I do think that in my particular case, I do spend a lot of time in my mind trying to organize my thought and trying to create these sort of theories, because it's the way my brain works. Is I have to put some order in the chaos. I have to justify what I do also, okay? Because I spend so much time in this in my mind, and I have justified that it has a higher, you know, meaning, and there is a reason to do it, and also I am continuously feeling the loss of Jacqueline. The loss of Jacqueline memories is in one side, my life revolves somehow, or is one of the axes, the thing to do with Jacqueline, the thing we produce with Jacqueline, but at the same time, her is continuously fading, you understand? And I speak to my sisters a lot about Jacqueline, and it's funny, after all these millions of years, they still we tell each other things and we don't know about Jacqueline, about our personal experience with her, and and I tell, and we speak about things we did with her, uh, just to try to add to this body of memories. But at the same time, and it's not just me, it's my sister, we work so hard trying not to forget her voice, you know, her face. Uh, uh, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. Uh, not because the memory is fragile, because I have no problem remembering them. I have no problem remember my other two sisters when they were children, when they were adolescents. I have no problem remembering them. It's because of the trauma associated with Jacqueline, okay? Of the sort of obstacles that the brain itself put to protect me, okay? We have our we have a powerful machinery, you know, in our head, and one of the purpose of that machinery, a part of keeping us alive, and make it automatic a lot of processes which keep us alive, is to actually protect us against ourselves, you know, and 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 forget about things, and block things, and so we are not we don't go into a vortex of from where we cannot escape, okay? So I know that if I were to remember Jacqueline as I remember my sister at that time, maybe it would be very bad for me, I don't know, you know. But with my sister, the recurrent dream, which is the dream most difficult to endure when we wake, and if we remember it, it's not a nightmare about how Jacqueline suffered or how Jacqueline was taken from us, which we never dream about. I have never in my life have a nightmare about her suffering or her being detained, or never in my life. But I dream about her being happy, about her being with me. And these are the most distressing dreams I ever had. These are dreams, and you wake in the morning, and for that split second, you realize that she's not here in this dimension, and this is the horrible thing, and it permeates your day, your weeks. You cannot take it from your head. My last dream was going with my sister on a car, and it was clear on my dream that we were us, our sister, and it was mine and me and Michelle sitting at the back of the car, and in front it was Viviane, my other sister, and I was behind the driver, which I have this feeling that it should be Jacqueline because we were all in the car. But I wasn't sure, even on the dream itself. And she looked. I didn't know how Viviane, Michelle, or me we look, but from the back, that person looked young, okay, with the long hair, you know, light brown, and And she was sort of laughing and telling us things, and I have that feeling that she could be Jacqueline, but I didn't go deep on that on the brain on the dream because I was worried that it will disappear, okay, the dream, and uh, and I wanted to look her face, but I couldn't ask her, you know. I couldn't ask my other sister because I didn't want to break the spell, okay, and uh, and suddenly, like in a small motion, she started. I think it was a traffic light, and she started to turn her head to the back to talk to us. And she turned to me, and it was Jacqueline. And I knew it was Jacqueline. And I recognized Jacqueline. And it was like a big shock and a big sort of, you know, when you have this sort of very fast happiness, then you have something like, you feel something physical, you know, out of happiness. Something like, uh, but it's very fast. And I have that, you know. And I think it must have been very, very strong. And I awake to my distress, you know, I awake. I cannot remember her face, you know. Although I can remember clearly that I saw her face clearly and myself on the dream, I knew that something was wrong. And I knew that I have to picture her face when she turned. I have to make sure I will keep it with me, you know. I have that task, that only task on the dream. I couldn't fulfill it because it was never there, maybe, you understand? But uh, I was weeks with that, weeks trying to remember, and I will remember some movement. I called my sister, we spoke to them, you know, uh, and this happened just now, about, I don't know, 3 months ago. It's like the Mapuche people in this area where I live, um, they are the people who were here before the invasion of the Spanish and then the Chileans. They believe that time is non-linear, you know. They have a special way to conceive the universe and their place on it. And even in their language itself, the way they build the past and the present, it's very difficult to understand because of this conception of time, and which has been very interesting for me to learn about. And I think that for the relative will disappear, and I completely think that for me and my sisters and my parents, time is not linear. You know, at least that was explanation that Steve gave me in the morning when I told him, and uh, and uh, and he has a way to explain things from a logical way, and to and I appreciate that because I think that it was very meaningful. You know what happened, and that's why we cannot remember her. That's why I cannot remember her. I see a photograph, I find her so pretty, I find her so alive. Sometimes she's laughing, you know, I feel so much tender, tenderness for her, but I cannot make a relationship with a photograph and my memory. It's a complete, it's a different reality.
Well, thanks very much for sharing all of that. And I'm not quite sure what to say, but I think it does capture what you say about time, and maybe for people who don't have your experience when they're saying, you know, how come something in 1974 is still so alive today? I think when you talk about time not being linear, it makes sense to me because it's like time is just sort of collapsed. It's not, it doesn't represent the same amount of time, and that's not your experience. And so, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and it makes sense. But it also really highlights the challenge for families like yourself and the experiences that you've had to deal with, you know.
I would like to just say something about the fact that to Jacqueline was very important the textile also. Um, she taught me how to use a sewing machine. Uh, she um, she taught me how to embroider very fashionable cardigans, you know, with cross stitch. We still have a piece of a cardigan she had that my sister Michelle cut the two sleeve and gave one sleeve to me, where she embroidered some roses on a cardigan she was wearing all the time. Um, she It was important for all our family. For my mother, it was important too. My mother used to sew all our. She used to do something which was incredible at the time. Imagine I was born in 1957. She used to um, do us the clothes to us, but they were not full of. They were not sort of little girl dresses, but she will design very sort of pop art dresses for us, completely straight, you know, and then she will paint things on it, or and the the artistic expression for my mom was very important, and we were ourselves somehow always drawn to create things, you understand, and so to me, although it's not something that I've been doing the whole of my life, because my life has been a bit complicated sometimes, and I haven't had the normality which somehow you need to be able to devote yourself to an activity such as this. It has been present on my life. Even now, I do a lot of my clothes myself. Um, but I would like to think that I'm carrying a tradition from my mom. Um, I'm carrying a tradition from my grandmother also, and I would like to also speak about this women tradition, which I don't see them only as eternal, extremely big quantity of work that women do throughout the history. But as I say, it's very important that we speak about this textile work as being sometimes the only time that a woman can be on peace, doing something and being able to think and to reflect, you understand, to have some thoughts on her own, you know, after she has finished a day doing just things for others, you know. So to me, this tradition of quilting um, is is very important, and it's very important that in a very, very, very small manner, myself, I jump into that train, you understand, because I admire them so much. Not really because I actually deserve to be there, but because I want to be there. So, um, and the link between and memory and textile is very, very important. My mother has kept a lot of drawing that my grandparents used to do, and I am now embroidering them, all these drawings, because I think my parents, they come from immigrant in Chile, and escaping very, very harsh situation in Europe, okay? And I think that you have to link all these things in your life to come to this. We are not coming from nothing, okay? So the textile is important because it's long lasting. And there is historical element. We can look back, and I want to sort of somehow, if I can, build a sort of timeline where the textile is putting together some of the experience and memories, not only of Jacqueline, not only of me, not only of my mother, but as a group, and also very important as a line of women.
No, thank you. Um, so, I mean, you're talking about that connection across ages. I mean, not even just in your family. I mean, textiles and that type of creation has existed throughout everywhere in the world. And so it's like a very interconnected process across time for your family and bigger than that. Do you think the other part, talking about the gender and the woman aspect, is that you're taking something which is often associated very domestically and privately with women, and you're taking that and putting it out into the world as more of a political statement? I mean, it's also a political process. Do you think that's part of the dynamic as well when we think of women and gender, or not really?
I do, but then we have to question whether the feminine task and the fact that the women have been doing this sort of embroidery and everything, the women were relegated to that. They were put there. They
Mhm.
were given that place or that lack of place in society, and they were the upper class women were taught to do a lot of be accomplished and do a lot of know a lot about art and executing beautiful things and everything, which will be sort of a hobby. But even so, you see how the women rebel to that. To me, you have to resist the status quo, and the what we live and the establishment is not to be accepted, and you have to resist, and you have to resist with everything you have, with all your talents, or even if they are not completely talents, maybe you are trying to, with all your skills, with all your force, you have to resist. So I did some embroidery to do with the massive protest in Chile, since last year, and also with the feminist uprising, and so you have to resist with that, Uh, uh, but if women in their own time, apart of doing that, they want to embroider a tablecloth, is that right? You understand? Is that right? Because also, as human beings, we are always looking for to transcend time, and artistic creation do that. But I draw myself on the feminist tradition, Um, in fact, I discovered not long ago, through my colleagues in the university, which have been part of this uprising, I have discovered that maybe I am a feminist, which I never considered myself because I was so political, Uh, but maybe I am a feminist because when I look back, look at the past, I was always, with that flag, although I didn't call it feminism. Um, but it has to do with equal representation, equal participation. It has to do with we fight against patriarchy. It's central to our life. It's central for everyone. So I'm very happy of this development. I mean, on my conscious, incorporating this element, a part of everything, um, which already has been part of me. And there are some in Chile. There is a group, and there are many women that say embroidery is also to resist. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the IPLS as resistance. I mean, they're a form of resistance. And I think what you're saying as well, something can be beautiful and be resistance. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes things are not beautiful when they're resistance, but resistance can come in so many different ways. And I'm so glad we could have this conversation. And so I hope that people will listen to it because they, go and look at the piece. But there's so much in it. I mean, we could talk all day, I think. It's not just a beautiful piece of art. It just represents so many different strands of history and your family and resistance and so many things that are almost impossible to capture in words. So how does it feel for you that that piece is now being moved? Well, you spoke about Roberta and it being part of the collection, but it's now going to be hanging in a library in our university in Northern Ireland, thousands of miles away. With the current restrictions, that's difficult because we can't get as many people in. But how does it feel for you that that story is now over there, and then when we put the story out, the story will be in another place?
Well, I'm so very proud, so proud that that particular piece, than the quilt, can be seen by people. And I said to Roberta, and I put something on writing, that when people will be with the quilt, will um, they will realize their meaning, and they will think about Jacqueline and Marcelo. And to me, this is um, it's very meaningful, you know. My sisters, it's a pity that my mom couldn't see the quilt, but my sister, they are so proud of that quilt, you know, and they they're always talking about the quilt, you know, and my sister said, for example, I was talking, I don't know to who, and I told her about the quilt, and and please send me the link. She want to see the quilt, and it's like um, it ha- the quilt has a life of its own now, you know, and I am so uh, I'm so happy that I went myself on that journey to produce that item, and I'm so happy that Roberta took it and put it into the collection, and that now that I can have this conversation with you, because it's important, and I didn't realize at the time. I didn't. I didn't. It's important to understand that that quilt is acquiring meaning, you know, permanently. Um, is it's just it's just something so special now, you understand, to all of us. And I don't think it's just because the work I put there. I think it's because of the work that all of us we have put there. You, Roberta, you know, the team that work with Roberta, the different museum or library, etc. Whoever has done something, you know, for that to be exhibited, has contributed to the value of the quilt, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, when you were speaking and then you said the word exactly, it has a life of its own, and it's also making meaning, because we now have no idea when someone watches this film or sees the quilt, have no idea how they will react to it and what they will do with it and what it means to them. No one has any idea, but that's what's so powerful in what Roberta and Conflict Textiles has done by moving these pieces all over the world. And it will be in the library for some months now, but then probably go somewhere else, so it keeps, as you say, acquiring meaning as it moves, which is an amazing thing.
And it may acquire, uh, when I was studying how could I put the words on the textile, um, I went to do a lot of research about that kind of quilt which have writing. And there is such a thing as the autograph quilt, which were quilts that usually a group of quilters will do for a friend who maybe was ill or maybe was getting married or something, and they will do, each of them will do a square, and then in that square, a part of the patchwork, there will be a space and they will write their names or good wishes, you know, and it was a sort of collective, uh, very meaningful piece. And I thought, but that's lovely and all that. And then I was thinking, but it was very difficult for me to find. Um, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, of course no, but uh, I didn't see quilts which incorporated writing, you know, as the writing itself, you know, not just a signature. You know, I didn't see them. Uh, I wanted to have some tips, you know. I didn't see nothing, so I had to do it all on my own. Um, and of course, you wouldn't be surprised to know that when I look at the quilt, I say, oh, why I didn't do this, or I should have done this better, you know. But because it was a bit of an experiment, that part also, you understand. But I also want to say, if some people who listen to the podcast want to then go to the website of Conflict Textile and see the material about the quilt, they will find there is all the text in Spanish. They're actually on a document so they can read it easily and know what they are. And also they are translated into English if they want to know their meaning. And whoever is interested in this and want to go and look at that, I'll appreciate, because the quilt is also to show and preserve the words of my mother also. So I will appreciate anyone who read them.
No, I appreciate that, and we'll put up the links when we put up this links to some of the other pieces and where you've talked about it. And I know before doing the interview with you, I also searched around Jacqueline, and you have other places where there's information about her and some of the incredible poems from your mother and other people. And so there's a rich collection of information, and to be our honor to be able to share some of that and share some of the links to that. And I really just hope that when people go and see the textile, whether they see it personally or nowadays they see it online, they can really just appreciate all of the bridges that have been built, and all of those very complex things you said about time that are being created through this process. So I really appreciate your work and what you've done, and yeah, giving us this very, or giving Roberta and Conflict Textiles this very important thing. I mean, it's so much part of who you are and who your country is, and yeah, it's a very sacred, it's a very sacred thing, I think. Is there anything you would like to add, maybe before we finish, Nicole?
No, I just would like to thank you and in court, Ulster University. Would like to thank, of course, Roberta Bacci and Conflict Textile and the work of preservation they do, and the team that work in the work of preservation, and the Magee Library, where is the quilt now. And I want to thank each and every one of the person who will listen to the podcast, and I appreciate your interest and your solidarity. Okay.
Well, thank you. And I just want to thank Roberta and Conflict Textiles as well, because in some ways I've got the easy part. We partner and work with them, but they're doing all this hard work, and it's just been, I don't, I don't know what the word is, because I don't like, you hear people so many times say it's such a privilege, and but it's just been a wonderful conversation. And I had all these questions. I didn't ask hardly any of them because I just wanted to listen to you, and I learned so much. And I know for so many people, whether it's other families who've experienced what you've experienced, or students who are trying to understand the complexities of what political violence does to people and countries. I think you've just given so much, and so you've just given to us, and so it's just been wonderful for me to listen to that. And thank you very much.
Thank you.